Two. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are going to be talking a little bit about the Open Way Learning Student-Centered Learning Classroom Cohort for 2026-27. This opportunity will be available until excuse me, until July 17th. And there's a project application link that you'll see there on the slide. And we will also share these slides with you so that you can pursue these kind of after our session is over, in case you see the details in there that you would like to take a little bit longer um, to look at as a team, maybe after our session. So we'll get started today. We're going to let me introduce a little bit of our team to you. We have Laura Gaines, who's going to work as she's the director of finance for Open Way Learning, and she is going to work as
There.
our moderator. And if you have anything that you would like to slip in, a question that you think is really important but may not be an appropriate time for, or you feel like you don't want to interrupt the flow at that time, stick that in the chat for us, and Laura's going to monitor the chat, and she doesn't have any trouble interrupting me as needed. So feel help us out by sticking any questions or comments in the chat, and this will be interactive, so we'll be asking you to join in our conversation as we go along for sure. I also want to introduce Ben Pendarvis, who is one of our facilitators and former director in Open Way Learning, and an amazing human himself. Ben, you want to say hey?
I will take that. I think I'm an amazing human. I'm going to go with it. Um, just yes, I've been with OpenWay from the beginning. Was colleagues with the founders, working over in Cherokee County. So happy to be joining a lot of Western area folks here tonight.
We're going to turn it back to Ben in just a second after I introduce Wes. Wes, do you want a chance to say hello yourself? He is a
Sure.
director with Open Way Learning.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Wes Davis, and I'm Director of Program Impact and Visibility with Open Way Learning, and I've been here a little over 2 years. So, all right.
Wes is also an amazing human, in case I didn't say it. Laura, our director of finance, I didn't give you a chance to say hello. Would you like to say anything or?
Sure. I worked at the Tri-County Early College as well with Ben Pendarvis, so that's how I met Adam and Adam Hagler and Ben Owens. And I was a Spanish teacher there, and then now I'm the director of finance and operations. So um, I ended up, my degree was in international business, and so I got to do the language part as a teacher, and now I'm doing the business part working with Open Way Learning.
It's all in your wheelhouse, and we are so grateful to have you on our team for sure. So I am Michelle Taylor. I'm the executive director for Open Way Learning. We'll start full time with that in July. I'm in transition as we speak with my former job with NC State University and director of the Mountain Office of the Science House. So this is an exciting time. We created this really great cohort for next year that we can't wait to share with you. And I'm going to let Ben Pendarvis kind of kick us off from here.
Yeah, just to get to know who's in the room here and hear a little bit more from you coming into this chat. I'm going to put this prompt here in the chat for you, but basically asking to hear what's your gold medal for this year. What have you and or your teams, your students done that's worth celebrating at this moment? And really thinking about as well, what are you looking forward to for next year? What's your wish on a star for next year? That can kind of ground us in some understanding of where you're coming from and who you are, as well as get to know the names on the screens. And I'm going to say behind the people, but we're all 2D right now. So,
Yeah.
um, so please feel free to share out loud if you're like, I know what this is, I'm ready to share, or you can share in the chat. But would love to hear from each of you.
You want to pick someone to go first, Ben, or are you just leaving it wide open?
Yeah, I was going to give a little bit of time, thinking time. But yeah, if no one else, if no one's ready to jump right in, why don't we just start with Rachel? She's the top left on my screen. So whenever you're ready, but you don't have to. Someone else could jump
That's
in.
okay. No, no,
Beat
no, I
you
have
to
no
it. Okay.
problem. I was typing, but I'll just say it.
I saw
Um,
you were ready. Yeah.
yeah. So gold medal this year. So I just finished up EOC testing today, actually, for my students, and I had a really great group of kids, and they have shown a lot of growth this year in biology, and so that's really good. I usually have usually I don't get the standard biology or the higher flyer biology kids. I usually get, like the honors level. I usually get kind of the standard kids, and sometimes they might show a little growth. Usually don't show a whole lot of proficiency, but this group of kids actually we showed a lot of growth and proficiency this year. So I think that's a gold medal, because that's hard to do sometimes when you're taking a look at your EVOS data ahead of time, and it looks a little daunting. Sometimes it feels a little overwhelming, but that was good. So I finished up this semester really well. And then for next year, I just want to continue to pursue, making sure that I give my kids as many authentic learning opportunities as possible, and continue to kind of be the person in my building that is trying to continue to break the barriers there that we usually have in the traditional sense of learning classrooms in high school, and trying to keep that wave going. So I started a little bit. I know Ben, I worked with you last year with STEMbridge, and I want to continue to offer student-centered learning opportunities for my kids.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel, for
Yeah,
starting us out.
yeah.
Congratulations on your test
Thank you.
scores.
Thank you.
Great. All right. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Wilson.
We are in our first full week of summer here in Henderson County. All of our schools finished up last week. And as we've been getting in preliminary data, I'm with middle schools. So looking at the middle school data, it's very encouraging. We've had some growth. Of course, we always have areas to grow, but I'm pleased with the data so far. And I would say the wish upon a star for next year would be just that continued growth with the middle school level, and the ways that we can get students to really reach their potential.
Indeed. Wonderful. Glad to hear the middle school focus. I love those weirdos. Those are a good group. I've got one in my house right now, so I'm very much feeling you. All right. Miss Marlowe, how about you? Or I believe it's Dr. Marlowe. Yes. Oh, there we go.
Yes. So yeah, I was like, yeah, can't even figure out how to get the mute button there. I mine is very similar to Dr. Wilson's, I would say. I feel like we are definitely trending in the right direction. It helped to get all of our days in this year, so that was a huge benefit. But definitely seeing student outcomes trend in the right direction, which means the things that are happening in the classroom are the right things. And I think having a good strategic plan that's guiding us in the right direction, but making sure that we're not continuing to add in a bunch of stuff, just staying really focused. And I think that's what we want to continue to do. And so the wish for next year then is to continue to build teacher capacity in those things that we're really focusing on, so that they become more and more comfortable and familiar with the strategies and the goals that we have in mind, and the ones that are working. So I feel like too, seeing the success just motivates you to want to continue to do that and get better in those areas. And so I feel like that's kind of where we are right now, is to keep that momentum moving.
Great. Great. Congratulations, y'all. Wonderful. And Marcia, Miss Justice.
Hey, so I think they're spot on, and of course they're a couple doors down, and we talk a lot. So the scores certainly look better this year. I feel like we are moving in the right direction with a common language. We're kind of all on the same page. Still have a lot of work to do, but we have a lot of ideas around that. And I agree with Dr. Marlowe on teacher capacity, and I think even in our pre-planning currently we're working on how do we build that. It's not just about like stuff, it's about the people and building their capacity. So absolutely, I agree with all the things that have been said.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing. Um, Michelle, should we share ours? Do you want to do that? Or are you ready to keep moving?
Why don't you, I will let you share as the owl representative, Ben. How do you feel about that?
Oh man, gold medal this year. I'm just I'm gonna toot your horn a little bit here, Michelle. She's been a wonderful addition to our team. Came in at a great time to really help us, reorient towards the work that we're so passionate about. So it's been such a smooth and just wonderful transition that we've had uh, bringing Michelle in, and so glad to have a colleague and a partner become more of a closer colleague and partner. So. Um, Gold medal goes to you. And then wish on a star for, oh man, for us next year, I would say um, if we could get a group of folks like you together in a room, that's what gets us excited. And just having that time and space to lean into what you have already noted is the biggest factor in all of this, being able to be human and grow together with each other. And so having that time and space is where we like to be.
So we appreciate that, Ben. I appreciate that specifically, but just having one of the things that OWL is all about is building relationships is at the core of our mission and vision. We believe in that as partners, but as teachers with students and students with teachers and the community at large. It's all about the relationships and how much can we attest to that as being all of us former teachers or current teachers in the classroom. So to share a little bit more about Open Way Learning and who we are as an organization, I was going to see if Wes could chip in a little bit.
Sure. Yep. Hi, everyone. Hi. Yeah, we're Open Way Learning, as you can see here. We work all across the country, but we're based, and the majority of our work is here in Western North Carolina. And we're founded by a couple of educators who were out of Tri-County Early College, and also Ben Pendarvis and Laura, as they mentioned, were part of that early crew. Um, and what kind of connects all of our work, I would say, is that we generally don't bring a box program of any sort. It's not a curriculum that you need to apply across your whole staff. Collaboration and relationships and building for the local context is really what I think ties all of our work together. And our mission is to co-design or collaboratively design ways to amplify the joy and wonder of learning for every student. And we mean it in a joyful, fun way, of course, but not in a soft way. There's rigor in there as well. And specifically that high levels engagement translate to those outcomes that we mentioned, like great growth and proficiency. Um, and also, as you mentioned, underlying all of the strategies that are out there are the people and systems and the culture that make those strategies work. So the reason why we use collaborative design, the reason why we try our hardest to elevate the voices that are in the room, is because without that collaboration, without living systems, then those strategies really can't stick, no matter what strategy it is. So. Yeah. All right, next slide.
Oh, see, that's what happens whenever I get too excited.
And more than just activities or programs like I mentioned, there are essential conditions that matter, and they're listed there. It's the deep learning activities, experiential learning, or whatever it is that may translate into authentic experiences, academic belonging and safety, where students really see themselves in the classroom and the learning, where they can identify a trusted adult. And then on top of all that, really are the facilitation skills, the people who are delivering that content and making those relationships, almost 200 days a year, 7 hours a day in front of the students. They have to be high quality facilitators. Yeah, and so I think a good lens that we'd approach work like this cohort through is with those conditions there, which ones are already strongest in your environment, and which ones can we amplify or turn it up. And this image here, as we look at it, often if you've worked with open way learning before, maybe you've seen this. And we'll often do a see, think, wonder with this, and just kind of walk yourself through this right now. And we look at this, we'd say, what do you see? And hopefully you're noticing the diversity that's there. You're noticing that people are doing stuff. There's not a lot of book reports, but there is a lot of collaboration. And then we'll say, well, what do you think? You know, do you think this is what our schools currently look like? Do you think this is the type of stuff our students are going to do? And then we'll lead to I think this is showing what work might be like in the future. And in fact, these images all came from a simple Google search of just what is the future of work. And so the question is really is are we creating the conditions in our classrooms for students to do this type of work, to actually experience this type of work hands-on, and also the level of collaboration, social emotional skills, sophistication that it takes to solve the problems that this type of technology is aiming to solve. So this slide here really poses the main question, hopefully that last image shed some light on, is are our students developing the skills to thrive in this century, or are we really just kind of chasing points or just those test scores at a surface level when we could really be going deeper for that lasting change? And you'll notice those characteristics down below there really link strongly to the North Carolina portrait of a graduate. And while it may not be upfront in our end of course tests and in our conversations, during PLC groups and everything, I think when we talk as educators and parents and humans, those characteristics are really what we'd love to see developed in our young folks, and also what we hear from them. And so I would assert that if we focus on engagement, on these characteristics, that those metrics, the growth and the proficiency, are going to follow in a way that translates to those deep cultural changes that we want. So yeah, and with that, at the core of everything we do is empathy in the design process, which is on our next slide, I believe. And so I think for me, what jumps out with the design process, at least if I'm introducing OWL, is that the number one thing we hear from teachers, educators that we work with, and school leaders, is that open way learning listens. That we don't generally, I'm talking a lot right now, but we generally come in and start with empathy and really want to learn almost to an annoying level sometimes. Just want to learn about your current condition and what your goals are, and really make sure we understand what that issue is and define it before we start brainstorming what the solution is. And we call it solutionitis when folks jump to solutions too quickly. So for us, it's really an iterative process where we elevate the wisdom that's in the room and take us through this process of ideation, prototype, and testing the solutions that help you to build a student-centered classroom that achieves those broader goals that we already mentioned earlier. So with that, hopefully that wasn't too much open way learning info. I'll pass it back to Michelle.
Hey, Wes, thanks a lot for that. And thanks for kind of taking we do a lot of diverse things, as you can kind of tell. One of the things I love about open way learning is that we do have content specialists that are a part of our organization. So we have math guru, we have science experts, we have our ELA experts, we have our multi-language learning team. So we have the content rigor like Wes was talking about, but we find that we definitely need that, right? You need the people who are versed in that skill set of whatever the subject matter may be. But if you do not know how to wield that sword well, and if you can't help other teachers in the wielding of that sword, then that's whenever things kind of fall flat. So it doesn't matter how much science, say, for instance, I know, if I can't convey it in a way that makes other people have those aha moments, that doesn't reach them on a personal and cultural level, then somehow there's a piece missing, there's a piece lacking. And that is one of the things I love about open way learning. We have so many protocols and tools to help open up that part of teacher success. They may have that content knowledge in that specialty area, but they may just not know how to unlock that in a student to help them get the same level of aha that they have. And that is one of the things I love about open way learning, and one of the reasons why I kind of hitched my wagon to the open way model, if you will. So let's take a look at this picture. It's time for you to talk now, so y'all will have to unmute or at least put it in the chat. And I do thank Shannon for putting, whenever we looked at the ideation picture and you were talking about application, that was a key word, and you'll probably use that word again here, Dr. Marlowe. So take a look at this image, if you will. I love this cartoon. It is a metaphor for our cohort that we have envisioned, and the cohort is a student-centered learning classrooms, right? That's the model for our cohort. So let's just do a quick little, I wonder, like Wes was talking about doing for the other image. Let's do that here. What do you notice in this cartoon metaphor, and what do you wonder?
I would say I noticed that one is much more interactive on the student side than the other.
All right, which one?
Definitely the right side is more interactive versus passive. And so I wonder, I don't know what I wonder. We'll have to work on the wonder.
We leave it to Marcia to come in, save the day with a wonder.
Well,
Wonder,
we
Marcia.
assume that the person in green is the student. The student could actually be the one on the right side possibly as well. Because what we know is that students that teach the content or they're sharing the content will be masters at the content. So it could be that the student's actually on the right side. But I think what Shannon was maybe saying is that the more interaction on the right side, and they're both problem solving in a sense together. And it looks like we have more of a, they may see a lot, they may be getting a lot more than just maybe a trickle effect on the left side. I don't know.
Oh, I love that. So you notice kind of the little droplets in the first image, but in the next image, you see
They get the whole picture.
Yeah, gusher coming out of the faucet. Okay.
And there's more than one way to fix the problem on the right side because they have more than one wrench.
I love that.
And then look at the person in green's face. So on the left,
yeah,
they look like they're not very happy, but on the right, both of them kind of have a little smile, right?
Right.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
This always reminds me of when my stepdad was teaching me about how cars work by fixing everything and having me watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, I had the same questions.
So taking that example, that analogy that you just used, Ben, look at that first image and the, on a purpley shirt person, the purpley shirt person holding the water spout versus the nature of where the water is coming from in the second image. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Yeah. When I think I saw it in a quote somewhere, a nice pithy quote about this whole thing. When you show me something, when you show me how to do something, I'm only learning that you're really good at it.
Oh,
I'm not really, you know what I'm saying? So like, I know he knows how to do it, right? And I know that I want all that information he has, and he's pouring it on to me. But I have nowhere to put it, right? I don't know what I'm doing with it. I'm not turning literally any wrenches like he is. And so my memory of what I did that day is more about what he said than what I did. And I wouldn't know necessarily what to do when I got into that situation that I needed that information for. I still call him back up and ask the same questions every year, every time I have a problem with my car. It's so yeah, because I know he knows, and I know he'll explain it, and it'll make sense in the moment, and then it'll be gone afterwards for me, at least. I need to start writing it down, get my AI in the room.
so you mentioned two things, Ben. I'm going to just reiterate and make sure that I caught that. Number one, you said, I don't have anywhere to put it. Like, storing the information. So by you being more of a participant in the process, it helps you figure out where in your brain to kind of niche it so that you can remember it or access it later. Would you?
It's like an embodied memory, right? Like I remember things that I've messed with, right? Like I did something with and tried it. Yeah.
So, and I think that the picture kind of demonstrates that too. By green guy or girl, green person's arms, where are they? Right? Green person's arms are like straight down by their side in the first image. And in the second image, look at green person's arms, right? So, what do you notice about purpley shirt person? What do you notice about um, do they have any role? Like they are very active. Look at their arms in picture one. Do they have any role in picture two? And what are they doing? What do you notice about what they're doing in picture two?
Makes me think either they're just kind of guiding the work or there to offer tools should they be needed. Like a different size wrench, of which I know nothing about. Just
So maybe you're not the purple shirt person in this image. I'm just kidding. But okay, I love that because sometimes if we take this a little bit further and talk about this as a good image of what student-centered learning is really about, and whenever we have a student-centered classroom, what does that mean? Well, sometimes people say the teacher is not necessary. If the purple shirt person represents the teacher and the green shirt person represents the student, would you say that the purple shirt is not necessary? Why or why not?
okay, at the risk of being the person who talks too much, I would just say I think they are necessary because I think ideally they're going to give some kind of feedback. And I think that helps along the way. But I also think if that person, I would just like to make a notation that if that person were replaced by a computer and it was online learning, it would not be nearly as effective either. Just saying.
See, I love that because once again, it is all about the relationship. Because one of the things that you mentioned, Rachel, was look at their faces, right? Look at the emotion. And if we do it through just technology, you're missing that social emotional connection. And that's a huge part of who we are as humans, as a society. And that is why AI learning and just straight computer-based programming models are not filling the gap like we thought it might. We thought, hey, the students can learn at their own pace and it's all individualized. And we found that it's also very boring and tedious and we're missing the human connection. But that purple shirt person, notice, like you said, Dr. Marlowe, about it's just in time. I'm going to pick up on that phrase you said because it's that just-in-time learning because as a real facilitator of student-centered classrooms, the teacher's role becomes providing that tool that is needed at just the right time to help with the frustration because thinking classrooms where students are at the center and the students are guiding some of the flow of the learning, when that happens, there's a point of frustration where they're like, and they may get stuck, or they may have just a need to get over the hump, or they may need a question that will help with just the right nudge, or a protocol that they do that will help organize their knowledge so that they can go to the next step. And a true facilitator can be there with that wrench or protocol or question or collaborative learning strategy or whatever it may be that can provide that just-in-time support that is needed to continue the flow of information so that our students can gain it. So the teacher is highly critical to a student-centered learning classroom, and the teachers are very crucial. Sometimes we have the misunderstanding at times when I've talked with folks that the teachers are non-essential then. And I'm like, no, just because they're student-centric doesn't mean the teachers aren't completely necessary as a non-negotiable for that. So what this is some common language around what is student-centered learning. So these are some phrases that you might see, but based on that, does anybody want to kind of give their definition of what is meant by student-centered learning? Anybody want to attempt that? All right, now everyone is starting to get timid because this is the hard question. I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to define it either because it's one of those nebulous terms that can mean a lot of things to a lot of folks, right? But student-centered learning typically includes these 4 specific categories. So think of this as a large umbrella that a lot of strategies or initiatives or things like that might fit under. But student voice and choice is critical in a student-centered learning classroom. Do the students feel like they have some ownership of what the next step may be, what choices they may have, or are they just being told what to do and comply? If they're being told what to do and comply, that doesn't really fit the model. Are they having experiences that allow them to apply, like Dr. Marlowe said a minute ago, or are they having these experiences that directly show why this learning is essential? It will create what we call a need to know environment. So instead of students saying, what do I need to know this for? Right? If you've ever gotten that question, what do I need to know that? Then they are missing relevance. So this experiential learning piece of a student-centered classroom naturally provides context and relevance so that the students don't have that. They already understand they're working towards a specific solution to a problem, and these are the pieces of information they need in order to solve it. So the need is explicit in a student-centered learning classroom. And of course, agency over just little voice and choice on a daily matter. They have agency over their whole learning. Instead of the teachers being the gradebook holder and the one that is doing all of the reporting out to the parents about this is your report card, students will own that. It's their learning. This is their process. This is their mastery. This is how they're choosing to go on their own learning path. So student agency is innate in this as well. And of course, that shift from being the sage on the stage as a teacher to being a guide on the side. We are taught many times in our college experiences as educators to teach the way we were taught. Well, we know that that may not have been the best methodology to just teach the way we were taught. We also have a tendency to teach the way we were taught when we were in school because it worked for us. So obviously it works. Well, just because we might have survived and persevered through some of those learning experiences doesn't mean they might have been the best learning experiences, right? So if someone said, what is student learning? We might could reflect back on this picture here. Student-centered learning is the second one, right? That's a given. But what would you say is not student-centered learning? So give me an example of something that is not a student-centered learning classroom.
Maybe direct instruction where you're sit and get.
Lecture.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I'm going to play devil's advocate. What if the students asked for that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with direct instruction. I just don't think it can be the only format that you can use in the classroom.
See, I was being what in Italian they call a scutch. It's a pain in the keister, right? So I was just being a pain in the keister because, of course, that's the right answer. You get an A+ for that, Marsha. But of course, that's, I mean, direct instruction. There's nothing essentially wrong with it. But whenever your students go, "Hey, we don't know this. Can you teach us about fractals?" Right? Okay, I just made that one up. Why? I don't know. Anyway, so maybe they need to know about fractals for the project they're doing. What's a fractal? Can you teach us about that? Sure. I'm so glad you asked, right? So if a student asks for more information about that, I feel like that is a win. We have won the whole day, the whole internet, the whole world. We have won as an educator when a student asks for lecture, right? So if our whole classroom is lecture based, of course, then they don't care. But if we presented a situation and they're getting to that level of frustration where We need more information. Can you help us learn this? We need information about such and such. Oh, great. I'm glad you asked. So we have created this atmosphere that made them want to know. We have won. All right. What might be another example of what, if you went into a classroom and you're like, oh, this is not a student-centered learning classroom?
I've got one. So in science, if we just give them an experiment that's already written and instructions procedure on how to do it, and they're not really having to do any thinking on their own, they're just following it like they would a recipe in a kitchen to make macaroni and cheese. There's not really a whole lot of student centered in that because all they're doing is passively following what somebody else thinks that they should do, you know?
So usually that's a great point, Rachel. So it's not just about being active, right? And that's why we have that second phrasing there under experiential learning. It doesn't just say active learning. So it's not just about doing an art project or doing a craft or filling in a notes sheet actively or following a last set of lab instructions. It's not just about the opportunity to be active. It's about minds on, right? So it's the difference between hands-on is great, but is your mind on? So creating a thinking classroom, the student-centered learning classroom will have students with their minds on, and you can see them actively thinking. And that may be through modeling, it may be through using protocols, it may be through a collaborative discussion, it may be through a bit of tears sometimes as their frustration increases and you have to provide a just-in-time tool, but you know that there's emotion centered around the frustration, and that's a good thing because that means learning is actually happening. So I say that to say, okay, we have some understanding of what student-centered learning classroom is, and that's what we're focusing on for our cohort for next year, because we know that whatever the subject might be, fill in the blank, social studies, ELA, math, science, if the students' minds aren't on, then they're not going to have the success that we want them to have that create those workers and those images of possibility that were in our earlier slide. So when we talk about student-centered learning, I love to look at some of the research that shows some of the benefits. And I know you know a lot of these, but just to keep us in the mind of why is this important? Why did Open Way Learning choose student-centered learning as a focus cohort? We do a bunch of different professional development offerings like co-design work, strategic planning work, we do protocol work, we do PBL work for schools, we do experiential learning classes, we do a lot of collaborative learning workshops. We do a lot of different types of strategy workshops, but essentially, we know that it doesn't matter what your medicine, right? If you think of a strategy or a protocol or a new tool or initiative as a medicine, it doesn't matter your medicine, right? What matters is the culture that's supporting it. And what we found is if a classroom is really student-centered, whatever initiative that they're trying in there, if the students are the focus, then these are the things that happen as a result. And I put if you want to know, well, where's your receipts, Michelle Taylor? I love that. You just call me out. That's fine. I could feel it right here. But my receipts are at the end of the slide. And so at the end of the slide packet, I put a whole list of some resources that support these 5 specific things that you'll find with student-centered learning. Those classrooms that met the objectives from the following slide are shown to close achievement gaps. So the students that are having the hardest time making that next leap, right? If there's a student-centered learning environment going on, the gaps close significantly rather than a traditional teacher-centric classroom. The test scores improve. Everybody's wanting the test scores to improve all the time, right? And the more student-centered we become, with the students having their own voice and choice and agency of their learning, then the test scores are shown to improve. Boom. Fostering that workforce readiness that we talked about. So showing those images of possibility that Wes went over earlier, we have direct correlation that the workforce readiness and their ability to get hired will increase by over 28% from students that were in student-centered learning environments pre-workforce. So that was direct data there, and increasing knowledge not just for test scores but for retention purposes. One of the things that I think is interesting is what Ben brought up is I can't remember what I was supposed to do next. But in a student-centered learning environment, because you have that control, then all of a sudden you've stored it in a way that you can access again later. And they found that retention is just skyrocketed compared to just a sit and get model of instruction. And of course, graduation rates improve if we have environments that are more student-centric. And so those are some of the top 5 different benefits to having a school or a system that has a focus on student-centered learning classrooms rather than more of a traditional model.
And Michelle, I will say that going from traditional to more student-centered as I've moved forward in my career, I also feel like that, and this goes hand in hand with everything, but engagement for students goes up. They have more, they're invested more in the learning, they're more curious, they want to keep the learning going, you know, so those are all things that just kind of feed everything that you just said there. I mean,
Absolutely. So
you know,
it's centered around them being engaged, they are the ones holding the wrenches, right? So yeah, absolutely. But here's one of those things that we talk about. The best medicine, right? The best strategy we try, protocol or initiative, fill in the blank. For example, what do I mean when I say that? For example, let's say that you tried a collaborative learning protocol and you're like, man, that is not working. My students just do not know how to get along. They can't work together. Well, it could be that it's not the protocol that's not working. It could be that it's the culture of the classroom that is not set up for that protocol to be laid in there, to be the right medicine at the right time. One of the things that I was working with a group of teachers on is as they wanted to shift towards more student-centric environments was this ability to create a classroom culture where students were willing to try. They said apathy is one of the biggest problems I'm having. I want a student-centered learning classroom, Michelle, but they don't seem to care. I can't get them to care. They are very apathetic. They are just unplugged. And I said, well, there are several things that can create apathy. I said, can I come in and watch some classes and then I can give you some feedback? And she said, she was a wonderful educator. She said, yes, come in and watch. Well, when I did, I noticed some things. In her, it was just kind of that muscle memory of teaching that we get into sometimes. Whenever she was calling on students, the student would raise their hand and she would say, you're close or almost, nope, try again. Anybody else got an answer? Anybody want to help them out? And she was trying to create a culture of collaborative help, but by saying sometimes even gently, no, or that's the wrong answer, it made everyone feel like there was only one right answer to a lot of the questions that she would ask in class. And so I just presented to her, I said, when you ask questions, let's look at the kinds of questions that you ask. And I wrote down some of the questions that I heard her ask that day. And I said, what do you notice about these questions? And she said, oh, they're very direct. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? She goes, well, most of them have a very specific answer. They're kind of direct questions and they're not really good discussion questions. I said, that is true. They are very direct questions. I said, but let's focus in on that one thing. There's only one right answer. And she was like, yeah, there was only one right answer. I said, but think about what that does ultimately to a culture. If we're trying to create a growth mindset over a fixed mindset, if there's only one right answer, that lends toward a fixed mindset culture, and it's subtle. But if we're asking most of the questions in our classroom that have one right answer, we say we're telling ourselves subconsciously there's only one right way. There's only one right answer. There's the best thing that I'll accept and the others are subpar or it doesn't matter. And then it makes them hesitant to participate because of this subtle culture thing that we're creating without even meaning to. Now, I give that story for context because that's just an example of a little tiny thing that can shift the culture that we so want to have be different in our classrooms. We want them to feel courage to choose to do the wrong thing, because that's the only way we learn. We want them to fail forward and make mistakes. But if we're subtly sabotaging that by praising the one right answer and not praising the process, or and saying, man, that was my favorite no. Holy cow, I love your thought process. Can you take us through how you got there? And then there's a little tweak we can make at the end, but it's the thinking that counts, right? So it's a subtle thing. So she did that one thing in her classroom, and she reported back to me in a couple of weeks, and she said, oh my gosh, that was it. That changed everything. So I say that to say culture eats strategy for breakfast. We can be paying for all of these different initiatives, but one of the things that we can do is help those initiatives really work. And that's why I said we co-design what is best for your system in this process. So the way this cohort will work is each school will have an implementation plan that is specific for them. So once we kind of do an assessment with you and we talk about what are the things that are rocking in your world, in your classrooms, and what are the things that you wish, like your wish upon a star, that you wish to smooth out or eradicate. If there's this apathy, we want to eradicate apathy. We want to get wonder. We want to get participation. We want to get thinking in our classrooms. Finding what is blocking that can be something that open way learning has had a lot of success doing to get us to that next level of growth for our students and that student-centric nature and environment. So that initial assessment piece is key to this process, because you will get a 3-day initialized workshop in September where you will get customized resources and professional development sessions that are centered around helping your team develop that student-centric culture. And what do I mean by that? What kind of resources or professional development? Well, some training around phenomenon-based learning, or PBL, or the experiential learning culture, right? There's several different strategies that we can help you leverage to increase that piece, because that is a key pillar in that definition of a student-centered classroom. How do we make a thinking classroom versus just a compliance classroom? We have some great tools and reflection pieces and some tricks that can help do that subtle shift. How do we maximize learning for brain-based research and study so that we are storing things better in our long-term memory, so that we are helping the students be the masters of their own destiny and the masters of their own learning? And how do we actually do that? How do we give the students that agency? So those are some of the foundational pieces of professional development that you will receive during that 3-day initialized training. Then you will actually come out of that 3-day training with a plan for your team, and we will come out and do a site visit in the fall. We'll have another little session that we happen in January for some just-in-time PD, and another site visit in the spring. But we will have monthly virtual sessions to help guide you along this process of this transformation of the student-centered model. I like this quote here just because you have to create the circumstances where they show themselves, or you can't see what's really lurking there. And so this provides us an opportunity to come alongside you to have those deep learning moments. So the details of this is that we'll send a team. One of the cohorts that are accepted will send a consistent team. It has a maximum of 10, but we need at least one administrator. It can be for a school or a system, but we would have one administrator that participates, because the administrator needs to get an idea of the buy-in. And it may be that there are some systemic cultural pieces that need to be addressed that come out along the process too, that the administrator can help with. So the classroom can only be as good as what's being tailored around it. They can only do so much without some of the other culture impeding on that classroom. So are we doing enough as a culture to open up the opportunity for student-centered learning? Of course, we want a school to be able to participate in a site visit. In other words, we will come to your site. We want you to be able to complete all stages of the process. And there will be a spring showcase where you're going to have the opportunity to show out some of the different progress pieces that happen and share with the other folks in the cohort some things that have happened. So here are some details. There's a lot on the screen. I'm going to pause here because we have a timeline coming up. So I'm going to pause and then I'll give you kind of a more overview looking at a timeline. But do you have questions related to some of the things that I've shared so far? All right, well, let's take a look at this timeline for just a minute. So what would this look like? Well, if you would like to be a part of our cohort for next year, we will have a maximum of 10 schools or systems participating. And we have application out. The link was at the beginning of this slide. It will also be on our website and it will be at the end of this slide. And we will send you a follow-up email that has the link as well. But you would need to apply. We will accept the applications until July I think it's the 17th. And I think that was on the slide before, maybe. I can't tell because the little thing is over it. Maybe I didn't put it on there. I think the deadline for the application is July the 17th. But then we will let you know if you're a finalist and able to participate. And then we will do an information Zoom in August just to review some of the pieces of what is required as a participant and all of those things. But mainly it's to set up a co-design session because we want to meet with you and have the opportunity to figure out those needs and how we can best tweak our plan to help you on your journey. So the co-design session is crucial for the first part of August. And then in September, you'll see the dates that we're saving right now, unless there's a hurricane, God forbid that we are in one of those situations like we have been in the past. But our dates right now, unless there's a disaster, and we are rebuking that, unless there's something that happens, it's September the 16th through the 18th, where we will have our foundational learning time. And that's where we will set some of those different trainings, but also you'll have time to work with your team. And then in October, November, we will set our site visits. And then each month we will also have virtual support sessions where we will continue to work on the work. In January, you'll notice we have our second PD offering, and then the learning cycle continues where we have our virtual support and site visits in February and March, with our closing showcase and reflection time and ending PD on April the 21st. So that's kind of the timeline model for the cohort initiative. Oh, look, I did put that in there. See, you just give me time, people, and I get there. Quit rushing me. I'm teasing. All right. So yes, the application for the cohort is July the 17th. So if you are interested in applying and joining us so that we can come alongside you, that time is July 17th. And that would be what your first step would be. And then if you're accepted, we schedule your co-design session and attend the Zoom and just save those dates that you just saw on the previous slide. Now, that being said, the link is here as well. It's also at the front. And like I said, we will email you the link so that you'll have that. But we're going to pause here, trying to make sure that we are protecting our time. And I'll let Ben, will you lead us in a question and answer kind of time frame?
Yeah, sure. I'm imagining that more questions will come to you after you get off here today. So that, no worries, keep those coming if you get them and are really wondering. But yeah, if there's anything burning for you at this point about logistics or anything that we can really clarify for you that might be a little nebulous, that would be a good time for right now. And then certainly feel free to follow up with more of your deeper questions as they come.
I do have a question real quick, and you may have mentioned it, but I might have missed it. The cost. If we have a group that we form in our district from several schools into one team. Is that also okay? Or do we have to do it by school?
No, you do not have, that's why I said
Okay.
school or system.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. And so some schools, and the reason why I say this, Rachel, while we're being really open with that, is some schools are ginormous, right?
Yeah.
Not a word, but it was being excessive. But since some schools are so large and they have such large faculty, they choose to do it as a school. But some systems in our mountain areas are very, very small, and they would prefer to do it as more of a system cohort and then use a train the trainer model of sorts, where then the group that comes in is like the core group working on some change ideas and working on student-centered learning. We may have a lot of, I've had schools that do instructional coaches and lead teachers and they call them star teachers in this one school that I worked with, but basically awesome master teachers, right, that would come in and they have a cohort, and then they are kind of rolling out and using that team to facilitate kind of a system-wide rollout of some transitions to student-centered learning. And that's why I said it's very adaptable, and we want to co-design with you to make it fit. And so this is the skeleton. So if we need to maybe work in a few more site visits or visit more than one site in a day, if it's a system model, we will make sure that we provide the support we need in whatever it needs, however it needs to be adjusted. So think of this as a skeleton. That's a great question.
Great. So what I'm going to do is just drop here in the chat something that can frame your reflections on this going forward. I know we're going to let you go here at 5 o'clock no matter what. But I do want to, this is one of those great reflection protocols that gives you the chance to really think about your personal connection to the information. And so if you get the time to do this, great, and you can share it back with us, it would be really helpful for us to kind of start that in dialogue with you. So here it is with the S's on it. Okay, so from what you've heard, what connects with what you're already doing, with what practices you already have in place, the things you guys were mentioning up top at the top of the hour here. Anything that might be extending your thinking, and there might be a question in that. Not sure what that might mean. And obviously, if there are some potential challenges that you see to this, that we can start to wrap our heads around and approach it differently as needed. We'd love to know that.
And I also put the link to the application there in the chat, so you don't even have to wait for that follow-up email that I mentioned earlier too. Now, if you're like, the sound of this would be great, we're really not interested in a student-centered learning cohort, we would like to have OWL do something else, or we would like for you to join us and partner in a different way, just let us know. We'll set up a quick meeting with you to design that with you as well. So, we're here. We just want you to know that. And we love this work and we are very passionate about it. And we love it when we see those shifts happen and those students' smiles start to take effect, like the green person, and even the purple person ended up smiling by that second image too. We want our teachers to feel like they get to do the work they do instead of they've got to do the work, and we want our students to feel the same. So if we can help make that happen, please let us know. Thanks so much for joining us today, and don't hesitate to reach out to any of us at ALBA, especially me.
Thank you for the time today.
So nice meeting y'all.
Good to see you guys.